This is my 8th book. They've all been published in Dutch by my one European publisher to publish all my books. But I realized this book has brought me a new level of attention. So I thought I might start by talking about how I got started writing, my journey to this place, if you will. I hope you'll find parts of it entertaining and edifying. I guess I'll start at the beginning. I was born a poor black child. I remember the days sitting on the porch with my family, singing and dancing down in Mississippi. Or maybe that was someone else, Steve Martin in the movie The Jerk. I was born and raised in Manhattan. I was a bit of a shut-in. I would have preferred to have been a sickly child, but it didn't work out that way. I always like it when you read a biography of someone like James Joyce, and it says, he was a sickly child and forced to retreat into a world of imagination. It always sounded so wonderful. Instead, I just didn't like going outside. Other kids left our houses and played in the great outdoors. I liked to stay in the living room, reading comic books, watching The Twilight Zone, reading science fiction. And it seemed when I was a young boy, 10 or 11, that being a writer could be a great job. If you were a writer, you could work from home. You didn't have to wear clothes or talk to people. And you could just make up stuff all day. So until I got to college and started reading different kinds of fiction, I wanted to write The Black Shining or The Black Salem's Lot. Basically, if you took any Stephen King title and put the black in front of it, that's what I wanted to do. And then I started reading freshman year, more the classics, the so-called highbrow stuff. And I liked the equivalency I saw between science fiction and horror and, say, magic realism and Garcia Marquez, the absurdity of Beckett, the mythical landscapes of Borges. They play with the fantastic as much as the genre writers I grew up adoring. And I think it helps for my very first exposure to Samuel Beckett, say, I found him to be a form of high realism. A guy's buried up to his neck in sand and can't move. He's an itch on his leg. He can't scratch. That seems like Sunday morning to me. So I was in college and considered myself a writer, but didn't actually sit down and write anything, which apparently is part of the process. I wore black and smoked cigarettes, but never wrote, until I finally got up the courage to write two 5-page stories, 2 5-page epics that I used to audition for the creative writing classes, and I was turned down each time. I was very upset and very depressed, but looking back, it was good training for being a writer, because when you're a writer, everyone hates you, no one wants to read your stuff, and if you internalize that hatred early, you'll be prepared later on when you're out in the world. So I was very lucky when I got out of college. I got a job at the Village Voice, alternative newspaper in New York City. Some of you may know it, some of you may not. The one thing you have to know about the Village Voice is that whenever you were there, it was at its height, and when you left, it went downhill. So if you were there in the 50s, writing about the birth of beatnik culture with Norman Mailer, that's when the Voice was at its greatest, and then it went downhill. If you were there in the 70s, writing about the glorious birth of punk and disco, that's when the Voice was at its height. And then you left and went downhill. I was there from 91 to 96. We put out a great paper. It's a shame what happened once I stopped working there. But that's really where I got started as a writer, writing in public, writing for money. And if you were on the premises, you could nag people for work. So after about 6 months, I approached the TV editor. Now TV criticism is like a real job, but back then it was the most lowest form of job at the paper, so it seemed right for me. And I got my big break into journalism, writing a piece about the series finales of the shows Growing Pains and Who's the Boss to American sitcoms. And 25 years later, I think they really stand up as the definitive think pieces about those shows. And soon I was writing for the film section and the book section, and I felt confident enough to start writing my own fiction. And I had time to write my first novel. I didn't want to do that cliched first autobiographical novel where you get back at everyone who wronged you. when you were a child. I wanted to save that for my fourth novel, Sag Harbor. So I decided to write a story about an American pop cultural figure named Gary Coleman. If you know him, he's a little black boy. And he was on a show called Different Strokes, where he plays a kid adopted by a white family. So I wrote a story about a black kid who's adopted by a white family. And the sitcom in the book is called I'm Moving In. And it was very realistic. I was very excited. I got an agent. And then we started hearing back from people. And I for one, was surprised that a book about the misadventures of a Gary Coleman-esque child star would fail to find its place in the market. The rejection slips began to accumulate, and I started to have some really bizarre thoughts. When I first became aware of Top 40 radio, it was the late 70s, so it meant a lot of disco. Diana Ross, the Bee Gees, Donna Summer. And for years I tried to understand what the song MacArthur Park was about. I grew up on the Donna Summer version. Perhaps some of you know the Richard Harris version with this Irish brogue. And most of you don't know what the hell I'm talking about. So I brought an audio aid. The song poses an enigma. Who left the cake out in the rain and why? Was it some childhood feud finally come to a head, a birthday party gone terribly, terribly awry? It wasn't until I started getting all those rejection slips, as I sat around in my underwear with the shades drawn, that I finally got what the song MacArthur Park is about. MacArthur Park is an investigation of the artist's journey. I'd gone to a lot of trouble gathering ingredients, and when I was done, someone left the cake out in the rain. All the sweet green icing was flowing down. I didn't think that I could take it, because it took so long to bake it, frankly. And I would never, ever, ever have that recipe again. Knopf Publishing Group, why did you leave my cake out in the rain? Houghton Mifflin Publishing Group, why did you leave my cake out in the rain? Atlas Vanity Publishing of Secaucus, New Jersey, why did you not even return my phone calls? That was so weird. Maybe I wasn't cut out for this writing thing. I thought about what else I might be able to do. My parents were that generation that if you're an able-bodied black person, it was your duty to make something of yourself, uplift the race, become a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant. Those professions weren't up my alley, so I tried to think about what else I might be able to do. And here I call your attention to my slender, delicate fingers and thin, feminine wrists. I don't bring them up out of shame, but it's to point out I'm not cut out for certain kinds of work, obviously. Far from feeling shame, in fact, mostly I feel kind of sadness these days, because we've just passed an important moment in America's history when a skinny black man with slender fingers and thin feminine wrists was actually president for a time. So if it's ever going to be our time, that was pretty much it. Now it's over. But back to my hands. These are hands that say pianist, hand model, surgeon. Were those professions I might be suited for? Well, let me tell you a little story. The first thing I bought when I got a decent paycheck was an ergonomic chair. I slouch, I hunt and peck, and I can't really type. And when I was writing my first book, I had to pop Advil all day, a popular pain reliever, because my neck was all fucked up from being hunched over all day. How could I sit at a piano bench without armrests, no lumbar support? I could not be a pianist. On paper, being a hand model must seem like the life. You get free watches, free hand cream, meet a lot of interesting people in the international jet set. But I had a very conservative upbringing. How could I indulge in the model lifestyle? I'd read stories about Kate Moss. It was the early 90s, so that was out. Surgeon, I was all set to go to med school, just head on down there and sign up, whatever you do. And then I heard about how long operations are. You have to stand on your feet for like 10, 15, 20 hours straight. What if you have to go to the bathroom? I kept thinking about this. Half the reason I got into the writing business was so that I could sit on my ass all day. So I tried to break it down scientifically. The average book of literary fiction in America sells 5,000 copies if you're lucky. Now, assuming that everyone loves the book, doesn't just throw it in the trash in disgust, and in addition makes 10 other people read it, then your book has 50,000 readers, 50,000 people who love it. Well, there are 6.5 billion people in the world. You've made an impact in the lives of 0.0000001% of the population. You're not even a gnat trying to catch the attention of an elephant. You're a microbe in the butt of a gnat trying to catch the attention of an elephant. And I know there's some writers, young writers in the audience. I don't want to scare you with that 5,000 number. I was trying to Google it before I got here, but I couldn't figure out the right search terms. I'm not supposed to use Google as much as I do, but 18 years in, I pretty much want it for everything. Like a Google superego. If I'm out drinking with my friends and I think, oh, I'll have one more beer, the Google superego will go, do you mean go home right now? Or it's Sunday, and I'm like, oh, there's a Project Runway marathon on Bravo for 10 hours. I think I'll watch it. The Google superego will go, do you mean read a book and tell your family how much you love them? It would be a total killer app, personally. Anyway. But where was I? The population of Earth, it's very intimidating. Well, what about life on other planets? You might naturally ask yourself next. Perhaps there is life on other planets, and they have a taste for language poetry, creative nonfiction, coming-of-age novels. Well, I hate to burst your bubble, but scientists say that the nearest planet outside our solar system is 10.5 light years away, which is pretty far. And the chance of one of our Earth scientists coming up with a faster-than-light drive in our lifetime is quite slim. Estimates about the possibility of life on other planets vary. Some say that only 1 in 100 million planets is capable of supporting life. And what's the chance that they would like your crap anyway? They could be all about the haiku up there, some 575-based civilization. So you're out of luck. And I got very depressed thinking about this. And then I thought, maybe it's out of my hands. Maybe I have no choice. A friend of mine is a real jerk. He has some fine qualities, but there's no escaping he's a real jerk sometimes. And then for years I wondered how he came to be such a jerk. And then it occurred to me, evolution. For generations, jerks have been breeding with other jerks to produce litters of jerks in turn. It must have started thousands of years ago when some Neanderthal jerk got together with another Neanderthal jerk in a cave. Perhaps they met while fighting over a piece of gazelle meat. Just clicked, started talking about the weather. Oh, Gluck Gluck, the thunder god is quite angry today, don't you think? Yes, I agree, and you have very lovely eyes. And it was pure chemistry, and they took it from there. And they had a child, and their jerk kid got together with another Neanderthal jerk's kid or Neanderthal of similar type, a moron or a douche. And they had a kid who was half jerk, half douche, and so on for millennia. More or less breeding and concentrating unpleasant qualities, herding all that negative DNA together until my friend was born. So I figure it's the same with writers. The artistic temperament must go back just as far. There was a Neanderthal who paused while beating in the skull of a Neanderthal from the next cave over, and he thought to himself, hunting and gathering, gathering and hunting. Is that all there is to this miserable life? And he was the first Neanderthal existentialist. And he found a Neanderthal of melancholy temperament, a Neanderthal female who liked to draw non-representational doodles on the cave wall, and she was the first abstract artist. And they had a kid who didn't like to hunt or gather, but just tell stories all day. And so on through millennia, spawning moody arty kids. In the 1600s, one villager says to another, hey, did you see that new puppet show last night? And the artistic villager says, no, I don't watch puppet shows. I don't even own a puppet show set. I only listen to NPR, a popular radio station for intellectuals in America. And so on to the present day, that artistic DNA surviving and getting together. So as I sat in my dirty studio apartment, surrounded by rejection letters, I realized that I was a recipient of all that sit-in-your-ass, muse about crap all day DNA. And it didn't matter if no one liked what I was doing, I had no choice. So I got back to work, and it went better the next time. I imagine I should talk about the Underground Railroad. I first had the idea 18 years ago. I was sitting on my couch and came across a reference to the Underground Railroad. I remembered how when I was a kid, like a lot of kids, when you first hear those words, you think this human network that helped slaves escape to the North was a literal subway to freedom, which is very impractical. And I thought, wouldn't it just be a weird idea for a novel to make the metaphor into something real? And then I added the element that each state our hero goes through is a different state of American possibility, sort of like Gulliver's Travels. And it seemed like such a good idea that I knew that I would have fucked it up if I did it when I was 30. I thought if I wrote some more books, I might become a better writer. If I was more mature, I might bring that maturity to the book. If I saw the world, had adventures like Hemingway, stabbed a hobo with a penknife or something, I could bring that world experience to the book. And so I would finish a book and think, am I ready? And the answer was no. Until about 4 years ago, I had sold the book to my editor, but I was having some doubts. So I decided to tell my wife about this Underground Railroad idea that I've been carrying for so long. As some of you know, sometimes in a marriage you have to make conversation to kill the silences. And so I told her about the idea, and she said, well, honey, the book you're working on now, I don't want to say that the book you're working on now about a Brooklyn writer going through a midlife crisis is dumb, per se, but his other book sounds good. So I was like, huh. So I told my agent, who I've worked with for many years, and she's always very supportive, and emailed her. And she just said, Colson, both ideas sound good, which is not very helpful. But then she did something she never does, which is email me on a Sunday and said that I can't stop thinking about that new idea of yours. So I was like, huh. Wednesday was shrink day, so I told my shrink. And she just said, what are you, crazy? I mean, we both know you're crazy, but this book sounds totally up your alley. So I just left my editor, who I'd already sold this book to, so with some trepidation, I told him about the new idea. And he just said, giddy up, motherfucker, which is old school publishing talk for, this sounds very compelling and we should pursue it. So I did and wrote this book. I'm going to read a brief section, a very brief section, and then we're going to have a conversation. And this, Cora, our protagonist, has found herself on a free black society in Indiana. She's traveled widely, had a lot of different misadventures, and now she's in this black community that's self-sufficient. They are a few miles down from a white town down the road. Every Saturday they debate the issues of the day. Sometimes they have music, sometimes dancing, and sometimes they have intellectuals talk. And so in this night, a conservative voice named Mingo has just given his idea for what's next for the black race. And then a more sort of progressive visionary type named Lander steps up and gives his idea of what's next in America in 1850 for black people. Brother Mingo made some good points, Lander said. We can't save everyone. But that doesn't mean we can't try. Sometimes a useful delusion is better than a useless truth. Here's one delusion, that we can escape slavery. We can't. Its scars will never fade. When you saw your mother sold off, your father beaten, your sister abused by some boss or master, did you ever think that you'd sit here today without chains, without the yoke, among a new family? Everything you ever knew told you that freedom was a trick. Yet here you are. Still we run, tracking by the good full moon to sanctuary. Valentine Farm, this place is a delusion. Who told you the Negro deserved a place of refuge? Who told you that you had that right? Every minute of your life's suffering has argued otherwise. By every fact of history, it can't exist. This place must be a delusion too. Yet here we are. And America, too, is a delusion, the grandest one of all. The white race believes with all its heart, that it is their right to take the land, to kill Indians, make war, enslave their brothers. This nation shouldn't exist if there's any justice in the world, for its foundations are murder, theft, and cruelty. Yet here we are. I'm supposed to answer Mingo's call for gradual progress, for closing our doors to those in need. I'm supposed to answer those who think this place is too close to the grievous influence of slavery and that we should move west. I don't have an answer for you. I don't know what we should do. The word we. In some ways, the only thing we have in common is the color of our skin. Our ancestors came from all over the African continent. It's quite large. Brother Valentine has the maps of the world in his splendid library. You can look for yourself. They had different ways of subsistence, different customs, spoke 100 different languages, and that great mixture was brought to America in the holds of slave ships, to the north, to the south. Their sons and daughters picked tobacco, cultivated cotton, worked on the largest estates and the smallest farms. We are craftsmen and midwives and preachers and peddlers. Black hands built the White House, the seat of our nation's government. The word we. We are not one people, but many different people. How can one person speak for this great, beautiful race, which is not one race, but many, with a million desires and hopes and wishes for ourselves and our children? For we are Africans in America, something new in the history of the world, without models for what we will become. Color must suffice. It's brought us to this night, this discussion, and it'll take us into the future. All I truly know is that we rise and fall as one colored family living next door to one white family. We may not know our way through the forest, but we can pick each other up when we fall, and we will arrive together. Thank you.